Hello everyone and welcome back for another video. So today we are going to kick off the bowzon series that I talked about. Sorry for the delay, guys. I've had some real life stuff going on. But we're going to start with the most important slot for the bowzon, which is the obviously weapon slot. And this one last season, the answer to this question would have been a no-brainer. That the Windforce would outperform the Buriza in just about every metric. But there was a few changes going into Season 2 that made the Windforce a little bit more compelling. Now, without giving too much away, this is a very, very close battle between the Windforce and the Buriza. And again, that change going into Season 2 is they've added 10% physical pierce, basically. So you pierce the enemy's physical damage reduction by 10% on any crossbow in the game. So that is just a blanket change that they made going into Season 2, and it makes the calculations quite a bit different. So let's talk about this through all phases. Now, Windforce has historically been more popular. It's rarer. It's more expensive. Obviously, another pretty nice change going into the season is that you can now get 5 or 6 open sockets on bows and crossbows where you could not last season. So while again I'm going to show you the math, and I've been saying this over and over that a 6 open socket Windforce is not the best Windforce, and much in the same way a 6 open socket Buriza is not the best Buriza that you can get. It's still very close, and the chance of getting a 6 open socket Buriza is way, way, way greater than it is getting a good slam and the 4 open socket puzzle blocks. So that's just something to consider. But yeah, let's examine this from all phases. Like, knowing that Windforce is rare, expensive, and just overall more popular, is there a place for Buriza in your build? Now let's just quickly, I'm going to open up my inventory and show off my Windforce. I don't have a good Buriza, but I have a picture of one here. So here's what we're looking at, guys, and obviously with any of this stuff, it's important not to get bogged down in just sheet damage or just like the eye test. Wow, Buriza has over 1,000 damage, it must be better. There are obviously important metrics to understand behind the scenes, and therefore we can take a dive into all of that stuff. Mainly attack speed is the big one. So let's look at what the breakpoints are for these two weapons. So this is with no fanaticism. Now, guys, if you're going to play a bowzon or cross bowzon, I guess in this case, I don't recommend playing it without faith fanaticism on your mercenary. You can use a might mercenary if you'd like with a beast, or you can use the Act 1 mercenary with the vigor, which I strongly prefer. I know other people tend towards the might because it has the bigger sheet damage, but I like the Act 1 mercenary for a lot of reasons. One, the level of fanaticism you can get on a faith bow is 15 versus 10 on a beast. It does change the increased attack speed calculation. And guys, remember, anytime that you are adding increased attack speed through jewels, for instance, or through a piece of gear, or a corruption or anything like that, you are losing the opportunity to add dexterity or enhance damage. So for instance, if you use the Act 5 mercenary with might because it gives you that more sheet damage, and then you have level 10 fanaticism, and now you need 105 increased attack speed versus 95. Now let's say you've chosen to go with a 10 increased attack speed corruption on your gloves. Now you've essentially removed the possibility of getting 40 enhanced damage from your gloves. That's just obviously one example, but it's important to note that as you make sacrifices, you're ultimately costing yourself damage. So and another thing that I really like about the Act 1 Mercenary is obviously the Vigor Aura makes you run way faster, increases your clear speed. I don't know why people would choose the Act 5 Mercenary, but some people do. So that's the first call out. Now let's just take a look at these two numbers, or these two charts here. So on the left we have the Hydra Bow, which is obviously the base of the Windforce, and on the right we have Colossus Crossbow. And guys, this is not, if you were to find a Buriza in the wild, it would not be a Colossus Crossbow, but you do upgrade the weapon using the Herodric Cube, and to, make it that elite version of a crossbow. And that will substantially raise the damage. Now, one of the other things is that, it'll raise the damage, but the strength requirement for a Colossus Crossbow is quite high as well. So that is definitely something to consider. But so let's just look at these two things. So without faith, without fanaticism, obviously the top frames per second is actually out of reach for the Hydra Bow. 292 is obscene, even 147. Granted that the Windforce only has 20 increased attack speed of its own, even that breakpoint is pretty rough. So we are looking at, without fanaticism, we're looking at hitting that 89, which is 2.77 attacks per second. Versus the 138 is extremely achievable with Buriza because it has 80 on it to begin with. So, obviously getting, if you add the laying of hands and a cat's eye and you get 20, from Nosferatu's, boom, you're at 140 already. So this number is very achievable. So really, the difference here is not that substantial, 2.77 versus 2.08. If you're playing without fanaticism, Buriza is the pretty clear choice because it does have that higher damage and the physical pierce, as we talked about. But again, I don't recommend playing the bowzon without that. So now let's look at these calculations. So if you are using Faith, or obviously Beast, this is with a level 15 fanaticism. You're now hitting the breakpoint for the Windforce with 92. It's pretty safe to round up to 95. There's only a handful of situations where you actually get 2 increased attack speed, and it would be pretty suboptimal because only your weapon can get that obscure increased attack speed modifier, and that's not what we want in our corruption anyway. So you're getting a clean number. So let's just say this is 95 versus 70. Obviously, with the Buriza having 80 on it already, you are at the breakpoint. You need no more increased attack speed whatsoever. So it does give you some flexibility with the gear options. However, I would probably still use Cat's Eye. I would probably still use Nosferatu's, just because they have Pierce not Pierce. The reason that I would still use Nosferatu's versus another belt with the Colossus Crossbow or the Buriza is that you don't need any more Pierce because we'll flip back to this image here of the Buriza. It comes with 100% chance to Pierce, so you don't need any points in it. So we're already making a pretty compelling argument for the Buriza, and I think that there's a lot of people on Team Buriza. Now, we're going to dive into the numbers in just a second here. But first, let's flip back and let's just call out that the frames that you can hit with a Hydra Bow is just higher. The max frames is higher. You can't hit this 7 attack speed ticks with a Buriza. So that is, that's con number 1 for the Buriza is this slower attack speed. So as you can see, when anybody plays one of these top level bowzons, they're hitting the top breakpoint no matter what. So you're attacking at 3.57 attacks per second versus 2.27 with the Buriza, which is quite substantial. So that's a win for the Hydra Bow column. Now, it's also important, guys, to call out that with every attack, you are life leeching. You are critting. You are mana leeching. If you have open wounds or crush and blow, while those aren't really effective for ranged characters, and while they've just received nerfs in general, it's important to call out that, you know, each time you shoot, you are doing all these things. So let's say you're playing a bowzon, you're in the middle of a pack and you're getting hit by something. Now you're a glass cannon bowzon. You have, you know, you can see in the bottom left corner that my zon's sitting at 740 life. So if you're getting hit, you're in danger. And every time you hit, you can actually be outpacing the incoming damage with your life lead. So when that happens, it's a important call out again, guys, because the more you're attacking, it kind of is survivability in a weird way. So that's just one thing to call out in the defense of Windforce. Now let's pull open my trusty sheet here. So I've run through a number of examples here. Just to call out, you know, so this is the best possible Windforce right here. This is a 4 open socket Windforce with 120 ED, 20 IS corruption. Now there's 2 very strong corruptions for a Windforce. One is 120 ED and 20 IS. The other is 120 ED and attack rating. Now those are the best. Those are the best corruptions. I actually like the IS corruption on my Windforce as well because it just makes hitting that 95 increased attack speed breakpoint that much easier. But this will be the damage optimal Windforce. There's no question about it. And again, guys, the reason that I let in with last week's video of enhanced damage and what it does, the reason I let in with that is to call out, guys, the 40-15 max duel is better in a Windforce. It's just straight up better. It adds more average damage, but also it was an opportunity for me to highlight that is not the case for a Buriza. You want 6 ohms in a Buriza. Now again, I called out that break-even point of where an ohm outpaces a 40-15 duel, and that is average damage of 75. Now a Buriza, the Colossus crossbow, the min damage is 43. The max is 114. That's 157. Divide that by 2 to get your average damage. That is over 75, and therefore an ohm is strictly better than a 40-15 max duel. So that is something that's important to note here. But let's go back and look at our chart. So this is the damage optimal Windforce. And again, guys, if we need a little refresher on how we recreate this, we take our min damage, multiply it by the total ED, that gets us our total min. We take our max damage, we multiply it by our total ED. We add any max damage. So again, this is another important thing to note, and I'm going to just quickly turn off my display capture and pull open this image again, is that both of these have max damage based on character level. Now for a Buriza, when you hit level 99, the most you can get is 247. When on a Windforce, you can hit 309. So that's just, so, you know, something that we should note when we do this. And we'll go back to our window capture here, or display capture. So that's where this max damage is coming from. 60 from the joules, because again, we're using 4 40-15 max joules. So you're getting the 309 plus the 60. Your total max damage is this. Your average damage is therefore this. And the max frames. Now, guys, this is the attack speed that we're talking about. So again, if you want to calculate your damage per second, which is DPS, you have to multiply it by how many times you're attacking per second, which again is faster for the Windforce than it is for the Buriza at the max increased attack speed breakpoint, which leads us to our average damage per second. So you can actually see here that our average damage per second is the highest on our 4 open socket, 120 ED corrupted Windforce with 40 ED, 15 max joules. Sorry, that's a bit of a tongue twister for me. And you can also see that the damage is pretty consistently higher across the board. So, you know, a 6 open socket Windforce with 6x 40-15 max has higher ADPS. Our 6 open socket Windforce, and again, this is using a perfect base, is higher with 6 ohm runes. Even the worst possible 6 open socket Windforce is fairly close. You know, we're at 1549 versus 1563. Even a mid-base 5 open socket Windforce is very close in comparison. And, if we want to keep things on the cheap and go with Ohm runes, for a 6 open socket Buriza, you can see that this underperforms all of these other Windforces that we noted. Now, the calculation doesn't stop there. And there's a couple of important things to note. So, again, let's talk about crit. I think at the end of the day, both Zons would have max crit. When I have max crit based on, you don't have many plus skills on a Zon, you sit at 71% chance to crit, and you have about 10% chance of Deadly Strike. This is coming from Nosferatu's. Again, this calculation could change. And guys, I've talked about before that the chance to double your damage. So both crit and Deadly Strike are a chance to double your damage. The chance to double your damage is 1 minus the chance of both of them not happening. So it doesn't add 71 plus 10. It's actually a different calculation, which results in a 74% chance to double our damage. So when we do this calculation, we can see I'm going to freeze this. Oh boy, I've been off this for a little bit, boys. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, freeze up to current row. Okay, that looks kind of ugly. I'm just gonna hide this. Where are we at? Okay, sorry guys. I've been my Excel and Google Sheets is taking a bit of a hit. It's been a while. So let's scroll down. So we do see that our average DPS, and again, this makes sense because our crit chance is the same. For whether we use Windforce or whether we use Buriza. So we are still sitting at the top performing bow is the Windforce. The 4 open socket, 120 ED corrupt, 40-15 max Windforce is still doing the most damage. Now, what did I talk about earlier in this video? The change that made the Buriza enter this conversation, the Michael Jordan versus LeBron conversation that we're having here. Is the 10% physical pierce. So what that means, guys, and here's a chart. So monsters have some physical resist, and so that I'm actually going to I'm gonna just open something here. So here's like the this is actually kind of hard to see. I'll zoom in here. All monsters in the game have all these stats, and so this is Area Summit. Largely, these are all the same in PD2, but let's look here under damage resist, and you can see that all of these monsters in Act 5 have a 25%, and these ones have 33% physical resist, which means simply that they're reducing your damage by either 25 or 33%. So these are just some monsters. We can go look at other monsters, and the Demon Imp, for instance, has 0 physical damage reduction. So these are things that are important to note, but ultimately, have a part in this conversation. So I've listed out the common physical damage reduction percentages that you'll find in monsters in Hell: 10%, 25, 35, or 33, and 50. There's also physical immunes, which have 100%. There are a handful of monsters that have 80% physical reduction. Let's just ignore those for now because the pattern is going to continue regardless. At low levels of physical resist, a Windforce is still going to outperform a Buriza. So as you can see, when our damage is reduced by 10%, we've factored in our 10% physical resistance reduction here. So this is the physical pierce coming into play. The monster had 10%. Now we've removed the 10% that is built into the Buriza, and you can see that the damage is much, much closer. So this is the best in slot Buriza right here versus the best in slot Windforce right here. And you can see that their average damage is now separated by only 5. So this is obviously not something, this is not a large amount. And this is where, we're getting into Buriza, like I said, has entered the conversation. And for any of these higher amounts of physical damage reduction, 25, 33, 50, you can see that the Buriza actually starts to outpace the Windforce in terms of average damage per second. So these are important things to know. So can we form a conclusion from all of this information? Can we say that Buriza is explicitly better than a Windforce? And I think that there is a case to be made. So let's talk about let's talk about the pros of Windforce versus Buriza. So pro for Windforce, the main pro is the attack speed. And again, when you attack faster, you're critting, you're life leeching, mana leeching, all that kind of stuff, and obviously clearing monsters, all of that stuff is incredibly important. Now, pros for the Buriza. It has 100% pierce. It requires less attack speed from your gear, therefore giving you more flexibility and more options, more opportunities to, where you might need to add a 40-15 IS jewel to make your Windforce work. Now you can use a 40 ED 9 Dex jewel, which is going to add more enhanced damage for your Buriza. So again, we're making a pretty compelling argument for Buriza. So it has 100% pierce. It requires less increased attack speed to hit your breakpoint. It does more maximum damage, and it does significantly more minimum damage. Now, all of this is average damage, but let's use the example of a lightning source. The damage is 1 to 30k in some cases, and this is a game of RNG, and you might roll 1 damage. So the min damage is an important thing to note as well. So the min damage, let's just scroll back up in our little chart here. The min damage on the bow is significantly higher. It's just under 4 times what it is for the Windforce. So that's an absolute pro for the Buriza. So now we've kind of established, the list of pros is looking pretty good for the Buriza. And I think the last one that we definitely want to call out is the price. Because this kind of flies under the radar. Again, it's not as rare because the Buriza, when you find it in the wild, is actually an elite base, an exceptional base, not an elite base. And therefore you get more kicks at the can, right, guys? You have more potential to see these super sick corruptions. I literally was just in Discord and I just saw one of these 4 open socket with an EDAR corruption. So these are available, right? So they're more available than this. I've seen 1 of these this season. Now that said, a 6 open socket is nothing to sneeze at either. But like I said, once we start factoring in physical resist, then the picture becomes a little more clear that Buriza is quite strong. So again, can we draw the conclusion that Buriza is objectively better? Now, the reason I'm going to say no here is there's a couple of reasons. So one, people have different play styles. So people either typically play solo or they play in a group. And in both situations, there's a case to be made for Windforce, despite some of these numbers here. One is that you will find when you play solo that things die in 2 shots. Now, that might sound a little weird, but why is that important? Because so even if you're using a Buriza, things still probably die in 2 shots. Now we're getting into more feel than we are objective numbers. But if you're killing things in 2 shots with a Windforce versus 2 shots with a Buriza, what is getting 2 shots off faster? The Windforce. So now again, we're kind of making the case for the Windforce. And if you guys ever have the ability to try out both of these bows, and I certainly have, the Windforce still feels faster, despite the numbers that you see here. And again, that the number one reason is that 2-shot principle. Well, again, that's for solo play. You typically don't 1-shot a lot of things, but you do really 2-shot a lot of things. And then the second thing is when you play in groups, you're now in a world where somebody's probably casting amp damage. Especially they've added, amp damage to, not only can the Necro cast it, but now Whirlwind procs thing. So anybody that's using a Reaper's Toll, for instance, might be casting amplify damage. Somebody that uses Atlas Scarab might be casting amplify damage. What that new Assassin Claw, all those kinds of things. People might be casting amp damage. Now, why is that important? Because in PD2, this is different than LOD. Resistances, whether physical or elemental, cannot be brought below 0. And that's a big difference, because think about you having a naked character in Hell. You start at minus 100 resistances. And so what they've done in PD2 is they have you can now only bring monsters to 0. So where you used to be able to bring them to minus 100, you can now only bring them to 0. So at a certain point, when you're playing with a group, you're becoming, your physical resistance that is innate on your Buriza is now having less of an impact, because somebody is probably doing that job for you. Now again, I'm talking in a lot of probablys and all that, but I think it's still important to note that we can't just look at the numbers and just decide one way or the other which is better. There is that feel aspect to it. And, guys, I made a pretty crude comparison between Michael Jordan and LeBron here. But, a lot of people, when evaluating the greatest of all time, one of the factors that is actually, aside from the numbers, is the eye test. Who would you just, when you watch them play, when you watch Michael Jordan or LeBron play, who would you rather have on your team? And this is, again, a bit of a crass comparison, but when you play with a Windforce versus a Buriza, what would you, again, if you get to see gameplay of both, you might choose the Windforce, which is the old staple. It's the Michael Jordan. It's the GOAT, right? So while I do think that there is a very, very strong case to be made for Buriza, and I mean very strong, it is very close between these two bows, I still prefer the Windforce. And again, not only is it a nostalgic item, but again, we can go back here, and if the damage is unmitigated, if there is no physical damage reduction, then the Windforce is straight up better. The numbers say that. If the physical damage reduction is low, then the numbers are straight up better. And guys, you even have other opportunities to get physical pierce. Now, not many, but you can use Soul Drainers, which will give you physical pierce. You can get up to 10% physical pierce. You can get that new Declone helmet, which also has physical pierce. So if you're considering, I think if you're considering the full landscape of the gear, if you wanted to absolutely deck out your bowzon, if you wanted to make it 100% optimal, the gear is still going to be centered around a Windforce, because again, you have those other opportunities for physical damage reduction, and because you cannot bring it below 0. And most monsters in the game, and again, we can go back to our area at Summit and look at the monsters. Most things sit at around 25 or 30. These guys have 0. Let's just click around quickly. These guys have 75, so that's a big one there. The Slingers, these guys have 25. So if you were to go through this bestiary, a lot of things sit at about that 25% mark. And you can see that at 10%, the Windforce is still outperforming. So if something's at 25 and then you use Soul Drainers, for instance, with minus 10% physical resist, the Windforce is still going to outperform, because of those low levels of physical damage reduction, the Windforce still reigns supreme. So I think it's really important to understand. I honestly, guys, going into this video, I thought that Windforce was going to win hands down on attack speed alone. And while I do still think that Windforce is the better option, like I said, I was very surprised at how strong of a case I was all of a sudden making for the Buriza. And moreover, I think it's better for, if you're an emerging bowzon. Because again, it does great damage. It has the physical damage reduction. It's cheaper. It's less rare. You need less increased attack speed, so the overall needs of your build are lesser. And like I already went through the pros and cons of the Buriza. But guys, this is an extremely strong weapon, and I'm surprised to say that this is a close battle. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope this helps you guys make some informed decisions. And there are decisions to be made because, again, these are both great weapons. And I definitely encourage you to try out both because, again, we just went through a lot of numbers. And at the end of the day, my conclusion is pretty much contrary to the numbers. So I definitely encourage you guys to use both, try both if you have that option. And report back in the comments below what you guys think is the better option. And I'll see you guys next time. Next time, I'm going to do the helmet comparison, the best in slot helmet for a bowzon. So I hope you guys look forward to that one, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.